that's one thing that we both do have in common, and that is public speaking. I've done, I don't know, certainly no less than 100 events, probably closer to double that, I would say. And sometimes the smallest ones I've ever done, probably 7 people, and the biggest ones 4,000 or 5,000. And I proud to say I give the 7 people the same show I give the 4,000.
Great.
Obviously, people say that public speaking it's the single greatest phobia in the country, and a lot of show business people, and so do I, and so most of us have 13, 14 psychiatrists over the course of our lives before we finally go to the great waiting room in the sky, and one of the psychologists I was seeing once was talking about public speaking and how relaxed I was out there, and she said, I actually think that's really maybe the only time that you're really that you're really comfortable being you. And this is absolutely antithetical to most people. The idea that you would loosen up on stage rather than clam up on stage is really hard for most people to understand. But I think she was actually right. First of all, have you ever been nervous before you went out in a public speaking event?
Sure. Yeah.
Really?
Well, it's funny. Nervousness is a cousin, maybe a distant cousin of curiosity. It's both things demand that you not know what's going to happen next, right?
Right.
I'm usually nervous because of uncertainty, and curiosity is rooted in uncertainty. So I was actually not quite nervous, but very curious 2 days ago in Vegas when Ryan Reynolds spoke right after me and before me, some gajillionaire somewhere. These guys have very different messages than me, and I wasn't sure what I was doing there. And so, as an exercise, I was really invigorated, maybe a little nervous, but I didn't know what I was doing 10 minutes before this. And
No, me neither.
I really didn't. I knew how I wanted it to end, but I didn't know how I was going to get him there.
I remember when I first started writing essays before I started doing videos, I remember thinking, these things might be good if I could find somebody who could deliver, If I could only find a guy who could deliver this stuff, they might make pretty decent entertainment. And some people asked me I did a coffee shop up in Pasadena with an audience of 12 people, and I hadn't any idea what I thought I would say, and I thought maybe I could get like a earpiece or something, I could cue myself or something like that. But very rapidly after the first one or two that I did, I lost any sense of worry or nervousness. And the reason
was this Firewall, by the way?
Yeah, it was a firewalls and afterburners. Yeah, afterburners and stuff. But before I started doing any of those things, and I was doing the first public speaking, I immediately just started to come in with like this strange. It's not even confidence, Mike. It was faith, is what it was. Because when I would, once I got married, it was a lot easier. I could come back after I do my 45 minutes and sit down and say, what did I say, and was I any good? Because I have no memory of it. And I guess what I'm trying to get to here is this idea that you kind of channel something, that you're not so much even creating what's coming out of your mouth so much as you're just flow. You're just a mouthpiece for it. And I remember one time I was so tired on the road. In 2013, I think I went out 26 out of 27 weekends. And I was sitting on my stool behind the curtain backstage, and I was falling asleep as they're doing my introduction. And I remember thinking, the second that he says my name, I'm out of that curtain and I'm going to be just fine, because it's not really me. I'm just going to connect, and it's just going to flow. And that is a bizarre experience to have something coming from you a little unbidden, I guess the key to it is you got to get your cortex out of the way and just have the faith that it's going to go, and then your subconscious just kind of does the rest.
Well, that's Maslow. That Maslow, I think, wrote about peak experiences. And again, back to music. The first time I heard of them was my high school music teacher described an experience he had one evening. He was conducting a choir in church, and it was just a combination of all of the elements. It was the setting, it was the circumstance, it was the beauty of the music, maybe even time of day. There are all kinds of environmental things that can impact these things as well. But so many people, from comedians to musicians to artists, actors, they talk about leaving their body and
Yeah.
and looking down and literally watching them do the thing that they're doing.
From
And
outside.
yes, and the experience is very conscious because you're aware that you're watching yourself, but you don't know what yourself is going to say next. But it's undeniably happening. Yourself is. It's like finding, as I did many years ago, old clips of me on YouTube in the middle of the night selling things on the QVC cable shopping channel, right? I had absolutely no clear recollection of trying to make sense out of the health team uh, uh, infrared pain reliever or the Amcor negative ion generator, but watching myself sit there and having no idea what was going to come out of my mouth next was just a sublime combination of horror and curiosity and wonder.
Were you reading a prompter for that?
Never.
Never.
No.
This is something that our audience may get a kick out of because you have used a prompter. The funny thing about using a teleprompter is that you are handing your stream of consciousness into putting it into somebody else's hands, somebody in the booth. And I had a number of times when we were starting at PJTV and it was just brand new. Everybody was wet behind the ears. And I think the only time I ever lost my cool there was when this one guy who was running the prompter just couldn't keep up. And after the taping was over, it's like, I don't know if you know this, but when I start the sentence, I have no idea how the sentence is going to end. I can say a sentence and end it for you, but if I'm reading your sentence, I have no idea what I'm going to say. So I am just going to go as fast as you can. It's a weird experience, but tell me your impression of this, because like you said, we keep kind of coming back to music. Public speaking is an interactive experience, and the difference between a hot room and a cold room is phenomenal in terms of your performance. When you come out there and you start and it's a little bit cool, you tend to be a little bit more careful, and and it just kind of goes down that road. But if you can come out there and as you say, especially if you can start off by making people laugh and get them on your side, a hot room gives you so much positive feedback that you just relax, and your confidence level and all of these things, that all these asides that you may never would have said otherwise. Yeah, I'm just going to talk. I can't go wrong today. Everything I do today is just going to hit. I had a speaking event at a fundraiser, some political event in Fort Lauderdale, and I was supposed to go on at 8:00, and I went on at 11:30. Because all of these politicians and people honestly were like this on the table, and I'm just sitting here watching this room get colder and colder and colder and colder and colder, and I'm getting madder and madder and madder and madder, And I just remember just before I went on there, it's like, I'm going to have to come out of this gate with the defibrillators, I'm just going to have to come out here and just like, boom, boom. And I don't remember exactly what it was I said, but you have so much of a two-way interaction with that audience. And even back in the days of the planetarium, when I was working at the Miami Planetarium with Jack Horkheimer, and we were doing laser shows.
Star Hustler.
If we had a hot crowd, the laser artists would just get into this flow. And the more the people responded to it, the better they got. And I've always been really fascinated by that aspect of how much an audience controls the performance.
Oh boy, that's something we can dig into. And by the way, I've been there, and I forget who said it. I think it was a comedian, but like the most wasted bit of real estate in the history of the world is the first 10 seconds that people waste when they walk on stage and say, "Hey, good evening. How's everybody doing?" It's like, what? That's just a missed opportunity. In some cases, I guess it doesn't matter too much because maybe the audience is already hot and it doesn't matter. But a couple years ago, was at a state fair somewhere. It was the same type thing. I was supposed to be on at 7, it was like 10 o'clock. They had paid me a bunch of money and half the crowd was gone. And the ones who were there were pissed off because everything was just a mess, and it wasn't a huge crowd, but it was probably 600 people still there. And so I walked out, and it was just when you come up out of the crowd and there's some applause, but the applause stops before you get on
You get off the stage.
It's that. It's like that. That's a bad sign.
That's why I keep applauding for myself until I sit down.
I ran onto the stage, not ran, but jogged pretty quick, big smile, and then I took what Sid Caesar would call a Brody, a big intentional fall. So I tripped and I stumbled, but before I fell, I lurched toward the podium that I had no intention of standing behind anyway, and grabbed it. And the two of us, me and the podium, pirouetted, twisted in the air, and fell off the 2-foot stage. The podium broke. Everybody gasped. Some screamed. Everybody leapt to their feet. I jumped up, hopped back on the stage, and said, "Are we all awake?" And then we had a
That's
few
epic,
laughs,
dude.
you know.
That's absolutely epic.
But the funny thing is, Bill, had the crowd been less dead, I probably would have been in a bad space. They had to be that bad
Kicked.
for
That's
me
right.
to do
You
that.
slapped in the face. Absolutely right. Yeah.
Right.
100%.